Number 10. Spider-Man. Spider-Man is generally known for being one of the most powerful and most iconic heroes out there, but even he has his weaknesses. In fact, while many of them are not as famous as he is, some of them are pretty ridiculous, including his weakness to ethyl chloride, something that also slows and weakens spiders in the natural world. So if you were ever wondering if there might be a bug spray that you could use to fight against Spider-Man, the answer is actually kinda yes. Although make sure you bring a big spray can of ethyl chloride, as he is a lot bigger than your average spider. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you are loving what we are doing here at Top 10 Nerd, why not hit that subscribe button? It really helps us out and you get more of our content, so yay! Number 9. Superman. Superman is a character that we generally associate with strength, but not often weakness, which is interesting considering that he actually has quite a few weaknesses, probably the weirdest among them being magic. The best way to defeat Superman would simply be to become a magic user, because against them he becomes kinda powerless. When it comes to the explanation for why, a lot of people's theories surrounding this have to do with the fact that Superman's powers are naturally occurring, not magic based themselves, although this is usually used as a means to weaken him in the comics, as he doesn't have a natural means to defend against magic, and it's one of the few things, like kryptonite, that his invulnerability does not protect him from. In fact, narratively speaking, this is likely why he was made weak to magic to begin with, to help give him more to struggle against as a character, as he's kinda OP usually.
In at 8, the Hulk. I know you guys love the Hulk, but come on, he's done some pretty terrible stuff in the past. He's hunted the Avengers, assaulted his cousin, resulting in like 6 mini Hulks, conquered the world, and even destroyed Las Vegas. I don't know why I said that in that order. But one of his worst and darkest moments was when he betrayed and destroyed the Avengers. The last Avengers story by Peter David was really dark, when a nuclear bomb blows up over the Avengers mansion. It kills the people who are going to take the mantle of Thor, Cap, and Iron Man. Then Ultron thinks it's a good idea to visit Hank Pym, who tells him to assemble the Avengers for one final showdown, or every supervillain will hunt them down one by one. Pym rounds up everyone he can, but not the Hulk, because as it turns out, during the Great Cataclysm, Hulk went with Thor and Hercules to Asgard. When he came back alone, he wasn't the same. Then during a battle with Ultron 19, he betrayed everyone. He tore Tigra in half, telling Wonder Man to make a wish, and then during a battle with Wonder Man ended up breaking his impenetrable skin, causing an explosion that killed Wonder Man but also blinded Hawkeye. Jeez. And at 7, Ant-Man. Ant-Man has committed crimes for his own self-gain, betrayed the Avengers, created Ultron, and helped create a Thor clone that ended up killing several Avengers members. The O'Grady version of Ant-Man had attempted to ruin Scott Lang's legacy, and when confronted by Scott's daughter about the situation, ended up beating her and throwing her to the floor, saying, "Who's your daddy now?" How classy. He also watched Captain Marvel shower, and he also did this with several women he wasn't able to close the deal with per se. He ain't no Barney Stinson. And going over to Earth 1610 and the Ultimatum storyline, while searching for his missing wife, Hank found the Blob eating his wife's corpse. Obviously this enraged him, but then he decides that it would be a good idea to bite off Blob's head and spit it onto the ground, all in front of his team. In one of the darkest moments of the series, and I think of Marvel in general. Jeez. And at 6, Robin. Considering how the reimagining of the Teen Titans started with Damian Wayne kidnapping them in order to form the team, that helps to show me what I'm dealing with when I'm talking about this version of Robin. While the father-son relationship may be filled with tension, no trust, and betrayal, nobody expected Damian to leave his father in order to train with him. See what I did there? No. Damian left Bruce to train with Bruce's former partner, called Nobody. The first thing Nobody tells Robin to do is shoot a corrupt ambassador. He does, but the gun has no bullet. But it shows that without hesitation, Damian was willing to abandon his father and the famous role he has. He then takes that training and decapitates the Spook and his whole gang when they had Arkham hostage. I don't really think I need to explain this one to you all. You know he's a bad boy, and some of you like it, and it's kind of weird. He also then killed Nobody. Yeah. Halfway through number 5, Superman. The Injustice storyline shows us a side of heroes we never thought possible. A regime set in place by Superman after he kills the Joker causes several heroes and villains to join him. These heroes including Green Lantern, who goes yellow, Cyborg, The Flash, Wonder Woman, and Shazam, just to name a few. After this, Superman goes on a killing spree, killing anyone who opposes him. He also outs Bruce's identity, seizing his assets and even bringing Damian over to his side. He then kills Shazam after he so much as questions the holy ruler of the world. Yeah, this guy is a frickin' monster. And his ways even continue in the second installment after Batman imprisons him, even getting Kara to break him out, and even betrays Batman after the defeat of Brainiac. This is why everyone is afraid of him, because this can't happen. It did in It for Scarlet Witch. In the 2005 storyline House of M by Brian Michael Bendis, Scarlet Witch suffers a mental breakdown after the loss of her children. This causes her to use her incredible powers to alter the very fabric of reality and recreate the world in an effort to get her children back. The story consisted of 8 core issues and several tie-ins and miniseries, and replaced the main Earth 616 continuity for a time, but was later revealed to have taken place on Earth 58163. The world was created when Scarlet Witch and Charles Xavier combined their powers to give the new Avengers and X-Men their heart's desires. This does end up reverting back after a time, but still, recreating an entire world in the way you see fit is never a good idea. Remember what Flashpoint did? That literally ended the world. And at 3, the Green Arrow. After capturing Prometheus and Justice League Cry for Justice, Prometheus reveals that he has planted a bomb in the home cities of each person who aided in his capture. When Green Arrow returns to Star City, he finds Leanne, the daughter of Red Arrow, dead, crushed under a building that was demolished by the bomb. Later on, the Blackest Night story occurs, and after this, Oliver Queen decides it's time for revenge, where he hunts down Prometheus with the specific purpose of making him pay. And the version of justice Ollie has in mind is an arrow right between the eyes, for killing Leanne, but also cutting off Red Arrow's arm. The storyline called The Fall of Green Arrow shows the consequences of his actions, and it takes place essentially immediately after this, which is often considered the worst Green Arrow story ever, and with Arrow they adapted it in a different and compelling way, making Prometheus kill himself at the end of season 5, and Roy lose his arm in the episode before Crisis on Infinite Earths. He doesn't have a daughter in the show, however, but damn. Oliver hunted down Prometheus with the express purpose of revenge. That's something that nobody expected, and I sure as hell didn't, but it happened. And at 2, The Flash. In The Flash, the Fastest Man Alive story in 2006, Bart Allen, who was the Flash at the time, died due to a clone from the future tricking the rogues into helping. Just an hour after this happens, Wally West, who was previously thought to be dead, realizes he has greater control over the Speed Force than he ever has before. He was able to pull the speed from Inertia, the clone from the future, and prevent him from moving as he interrogated him while running. While being questioned, Inertia shows how much he enjoyed his part in killing Bart, which made Wally absolutely lose it. He claims that the only reason Inertia is alive is because he's at least part Bart, so instead he runs him into the Flash Museum and uses his incredible control over the Speed Force to freeze Inertia in place, trapping him in a frozen body, forcing him to stare forever at the statue of the man he killed. That's terrible. That's worse than death. That's something that no fan ever thought the Flash could do, but it happened. Jeez. Finally, in at number 1, Doctor Strange. In Jason Aaron's Doctor Strange run, it's revealed that conjuring spells can cause immense suffering on the body and mind. So as a way to try and manage and even negate the pain, allowing him to be immensely more powerful, Strange takes all the suffering he feels and locks it in the basement of the Sanctum Sanctorum. But eventually that pain takes its own physical form after being trapped for so many years, and grows more and more powerful in this form, until eventually it gets freed by the Sorcerer Supreme and decides it should inflict pain on everyone who's devoted to the Sorcerer. The pain then feeds on the pain of everyone while terrorizing them as Mr. Misery. Each and every victim of this horrific and terrible beast is due to Strange wanting to have consequence-free magic, but as we learned from Rumpelstiltskin in Once Upon a Time, magic always comes with a price.
Number 10, Captain Marvel. So sad to put Captain Marvel on this list, I love her so much. Oh well, sometimes she's a bad guy. Carol Danvers became almost as ignorant of a villain as some of her own rogues during the Second Civil War. She believed the best course of action was to believe in Ulysses' visions, putting all her faith in them as opposed to being guarded, all because one of them had been right. Thanos had returned as predicted, and as a result, Rhodey was killed, or believed to have been killed. He'd return later. This cataclysmic event blinded Captain Marvel to see only one course of action, a very tunnel vision-esque Jan Rog way of thinking if you ask me, who was always blinded by his own jealousy, his own emotions. In a way, Danvers also fell victim to her own emotions, which clouded her judgment. Beyond that, Rogue has been a sometimes villain for Carol, and although I love me some Carol Danvers, I would definitely have to say when compared side by side with Rogue, Carol can definitely be considered worse in terms of just which character's cooler. Like, I think we all agree that Rogue is cooler than Carol Danvers. Pains me a little to say that, but it's true, you know? I'm a huge Rogue fan, so that's how it goes. Number 9, Batman. Batman has a tendency to take things too far at times. He's obsessive and controlling, and while his actions are usually backed up by the best of intentions, sometimes he has a tendency to cross the line. You may be thinking to yourself, well, Batman can't be that bad, at least he has a strong moral code, right? I mean, he doesn't kill people. True. Well, except for when he does. Back in the day, the original Batman we were introduced to in the 1940s wasn't quite as much of a goody-goody as he is now. And he isn't even really a goody-goody now, if we're being honest. That's more Superman's thing. Originally, the Dark Knight didn't have as many qualms with killing evildoers, or people that were just transformed by a Hugo Strange serum, so it wasn't even really their fault. In Batman issue number 1, we see Batman using a machine gun attached to his plane to mow down his opponents, and worse yet, he hung a man from his bat plane, lifting him off the ground and leaving him to strangle to death in a noose. What's actually worse than this, I know it sounds like it can't get worse, is how chill Batman is about the whole scenario. Like, all this death and destruction, it doesn't even bother him. That's some Joker level nonchalance. Number 8. Ra's al Ghul. I didn't want to put Ra's on here, but there are simply too many people online that seem to find him overdone, and not quite as deep as they would like. That's right, Ra's al Ghul, often touted as one of Batman's ultimate foes, is, according to some, kinda boring. I guess, to be fair, I do find Talia to be a more interesting villain and leader of the League of Assassins than her dad was. Sorry, Ra's. Number 7. Bane. Despite being a really complex villain, Bane ends up often feeling kinda one note. He's insanely intelligent and well read, but often his on display oversized muscles overshadow the complex inner workings of what the character could be. Usually because Bane is so big of a character both physically but also in terms of his presence. He ends up getting big moments and even big victories over Batman, like when he completely defeated him by breaking his back in Nightfall, but when it comes to Bane as a recurring villain having as much consistency and staying power as some others, like Ra's or Joker, Bane, he struggles. And so while his big moments are definitely something that we love to see and that are super memorable, it's during those in-between moments that we really see how overrated he can be as a Batman villain. I just want to see like more of Bane the intellect. If you have a Bane intellect story for me, recommend it in the comments. I want to read it. Number 6. Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn is one of the most overrated, but we all still love her. Like so many on this list, this is in fact why she makes her cut, because she is so beloved, too beloved some might say. Harley Quinn started out as the girlfriend of the Joker, who was really only intended to play a small role in the Batman animated series, but she became so popular they decided to give her more of a role and more to do. In fact, in the animated series, she almost single-handedly defeated Batman herself after capturing him. It is only through Batman manipulating Harley's mind, twisting the knife of self-doubt that was clearly already placed there by her unstable and unhealthy relationship with the Joker and her own self-esteem issues, the Batman was able to escape. You'd actually think with Harley having been a psychiatrist herself, she might have picked up on what he was doing. But ultimately, that is how Batman gets away. Still, Harley manages to capture and almost defeat Batman all on her own. However, it has often become a trope that Harley can do almost anything in the comics, with her popularity rather than her demonstration of her very real skills and abilities, often acting as her true superpower. We just let her do stuff because we love her. Granted, once again, it also depends on who's writing her, but it's an easy trap that many seem to fall into, at least from time to time, so yeah. Number 5. Punchline. Now if we're talking overrated villains, if Harley is making the cut, there's no way I'm not including the Joker's newest female partner in crime, Alexis Kay, aka Punchline. A lot of people have dubbed Punchline Harley Quinn 2.0, a younger and to some, hotter new version of Joker's girlfriend and accomplice. Although admittedly, Punchline would actually be pretty offended to hear people say this herself. She does not advertise as Joker's girlfriend, and they have both seemed to deny a romantic relationship between them. She's like, no, I'm not dating him. We're just working together. Instead, Alexis sees herself as the Joker's new protege, someone who is wise to his tricks and believes she is different from Harley Quinn because she's more in charge of what she wants, instead of being manipulated and brainwashed by the Joker as Harley was. At least, that is Alexis's own take. However, others out there see things a little differently, Harley included. But namely, we're talking about here, the fans. Many of whom were actually shocked when Punchline got the upper hand in a fight against Harley Quinn, who is much more established. I think we all think that Punchline is a cool concept and definitely has a cool design, but at the end of the day, it feels like she's advancing a little too fast in her criminal career and is ultimately being inflated when it comes to her power levels as a new character. She hasn't earned her rep yet. It feels like she was just kind of like hand gifted that. So that's why she's a bit overrated. Number 4, Hush. Hush is a villain who really is just kind of ridiculous, to be honest. The implication initially that he might be Jason Todd was interesting, and then we learned that he was actually Batman's old friend turned foe, Thomas Elliot. This also had the potential to be intriguing, because, you know, we could learn a lot more about younger Bruce and things in his life, and Thomas, and how they could be a foil for each other. However, I would say that Hush ended up being kind of just a lesser Ghostmaker, and yes, I do say that knowing that the name Ghostmaker sounds kind of ridiculous. Initially, I was not a Ghostmaker fan, but I gotta say, I just feel like Ghostmaker did it better and has more potential to reappear as a rival of Batman's as opposed to just like a straight up villain. Hush had a lot of promise but didn't end up delivering, which is also likely why we almost never see him featured in stories anymore. Number 3, Victor Zsasz. Victor Zsasz is unhinged, I'll give you that, but ultimately he's just a man, usually with a knife. I've seen versions of this character that made him seem almost superhuman when it came to his fighting skill, his strength, his abilities, but really, Zsasz, in terms of his comic book origin, he's like just a guy that really loves to kill, which is definitely super scary, but at the same time, just a guy. Really, Batman should almost always be able to take down Zsasz easily, considering all of Batman's training in comparison to Victor's. Now granted, I will admit that I love Anthony Carrigan, which is why I'm willing to take it a little easier on this character and not put him so high up. I don't believe he's been overdone necessarily, I just think at a base level he really isn't that powerful, and it would be hard for him to keep up with Batman on paper, and yet he sometimes still does that anyways. Times where he looks like he has super strength, I'm like, okay, this is just Victor Zsasz, let's calm down. Number 2, Firefly. While Firefly doesn't get a lot of love when it comes to his presence in the comics, this could be because he's very one note. Who is he? Well, it depends on the continuity, but usually he's Ted Carson. What does he do? He likes to set things on fire, so that's what he does. Also, he has a jetpack, so he can fly. Get it? Fire, fly, Firefly. Get it? Number 1, Joker. The Joker is probably the most overrated villain of the lot. Now don't get me wrong, he makes for a great foil to Batman in terms of his characterization, but at the same time he's not anything special in terms of his power set or anything like that. And honestly, there's way too much Joker content. Like, I need a break. I'm losing my mind. That's why I had to rank him so high on this list, and I feel like everyone's gonna agree with me. I mean, if you don't agree with me, state your case in the comments. I'd love to hear it, but yeah. Also, when it comes to the Joker, we've just gotten so much Joker content. I think I just have Joker fatigue. I feel like every time I turn around, there's a new Joker series waiting to look me in the eye, or a new film featuring him. Even Matt Reeves' The Batman teased the Joker at the end, when I don't really think it needed to. It had a really cool version of the Riddler, but yeah, sure, let's tease the Joker. Sure, I was intrigued like most people when it came to his appearance there, but at the same time, I did feel like it was unnecessary. Not every Batman film or franchise needs to have the Joker in it, and the fact that so many people love the Joker so much kind of makes me concerned for us as a society.
And at 10, Reed Richards. We all know the story of the Fantastic Four, and their leader, Reed Richards, has not been the best companion to his group over the years. His problem-solving skills usually involve him making a bad decision and not consulting everyone else, or anyone for that fact, even if it involves their lives too. In the 2013 Fantastic Four series by Matt Fraction, Mark Bagley, and Mark Farmer, Reed discovers that the powers the Fantastic Four had gotten during their mission was ultimately killing them, but he hides this fact until Sue's powers kick in without her wanting them to. Then he reveals that they're actually dying. Not his call to make, and speaking of Sue, holy crap, this man is a handful. He injected their son with nanomachines to track him without consulting her. Sure, it was with good intentions, but still. And there was also the time that he hit her. Yeah, while this panel is usually taken out of context, the context doesn't make it much better. If anything, it can make it worse. While Sue is being manipulated by Psycho Man turning her into Malice, Reed notices that her feelings were flipped. So in an effort to make her love him, he had to get Sue to hate him. He does this by hurling insults at her. This was clearly working already and was about to work entirely, but then he puts the cherry on top of the crab cake and slaps her in the face. Sure, it wasn't Sue, but he was doing all of this to make Sue hate him, so to him, it was Sue. And he did intentionally hit her. Even if it was Malice, he was still hitting Sue. So, jeez. And at 9, Namor. While Namor might be a member of the Illuminati, this isn't the version of Earth I'm talking about. On Earth 1610, Namor was sealed away in a tomb at the bottom of the ocean. The Fantastic Four found it and freed him, and he put up a fight when he was released, but they managed to beat him. The translations they got off the tomb said that he was the last king of Atlantis, but he wouldn't reveal any secrets unless he was alone with Sue, calling her the prettiest one. After revealing some things, he attempted to seduce Sue, who was married to Ben Grimm on this Earth, but she rejected. Enraged, he attacked her, and his final demand was a kiss from Sue as a recognition of his victory. She complied, claiming that it was because he was holding New York hostage with a giant tsunami, but this can later be challenged, since after being attacked by Agatha Harkness and the Seven, they throw her into the sea, leaving her for dead. But Namor rescues her and brings her to Sestadivin. He continues to try to seduce her, and she ends up giving in slightly, hugging and then kissing him, while she was married to Ben. Sure, Mr. Steal Your Girl may be bad, you're saying, but that's not worse than a villain. Well, let me tell you that before all of this, the Fantastic Four learned that he was actually behind the destruction of Atlantis, and that the translation really meant the worst super criminal of Atlantis. Yeah.
Number 8. Rogue. Rogue was one of my favorite characters growing up, and I think what I loved about her so much was the tragedy of her story and her powers. But what's even more, I love the way that Rogue overcame them. Still, this would be a terrible weakness to have or have had, so that's why I'm including Rogue on our list. Rogue's powers allow her to adopt the powers of whoever she comes into physical contact with, actually taking their powers for herself, basically draining them. But that's not all Rogue takes with her touch. She can also take your memories and drain your life force. Or, at least, she could do that. Rogue has since overcome this weakness by facing her fears. As it turns out, it was her own subconscious that was basically making it manifest. Number 7. Wonder Woman. One of Wonder Woman's original weaknesses seems to be in line with what she represents as a character: female power and strength. As an Amazon, Wonder Woman was initially also susceptible to losing her strength and power if she was ever restrained by a man. While some might see this as kind of a sexist weakness in the comics, I would actually see it as kind of being the opposite. To me, it's more meant to symbolize a history of oppression against women and its consequences. At least, that's how I see that weakness. However, regardless of any greater meaning behind it, it was also a pretty silly weakness in the sense that it made Wonder Woman fairly easy to defeat under certain circumstances, and if she was going up against men, because if they just found her bracelets, that's kinda it. So I do have to say, I'm glad this is no longer a rule for her in the comics today. Number 6. Nightcrawler. Well, Nightcrawler is a super powerful character overall, and an iconic and amazing character as well. He isn't actually the most powerful teleporter. This has to do with his weird restrictions and weaknesses surrounding teleportation. The big one being that he can only teleport by a max distance of about, I believe, 2 miles at a time. The other main one being the more that he teleports, the more exhausted he gets, and Kurt as a teleporter can tire fairly quickly if he's forced to make multiple jumps, which if he has to go far, he kind of has to do because each jump he can only go so far. Kurt does teleport through the Brimstone dimension, which I saw some people in the comics bringing up as like a super powerful thing, but this is actually more how his teleportation skills work. It's not necessarily something he's choosing to do, as he has to travel through the Brimstone dimension to get where he's going. So while yes, he can travel interdimensionally, it's only one dimension, and it's not really by choice, it's more by design. However, Kurt is an amazing character because of his limitations. That's what makes him so great. It means that when Kurt has to push it to save the day, and he often of course does just that because he really is a hero, he's often putting his life on the line for ideals he believes in, or for all of Earth or all of life itself, whatever he's defending. That's why we love Kurt. Number 5. Green Lantern. Hal Jordan is Green Lantern, or one of the Green Lanterns anyways, and as a Green Lantern he has a pretty iconic and ridiculous weakness. Or at least for a very long time in the comics, he did have that weakness. Hal had a weakness to the color yellow. In fact, all Green Lanterns did for a while. This was as a result of parallax existing within the Green Lantern Corps' central battery. Having the entity of fear within the battery caused all Green Lanterns to develop a weakness to yellow, something that was used in All-Star Batman and Robin and Frank Miller's alternate reality to weaken and torment Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. In the All-Star Batman and Robin comic, Batman and Robin basically paint themselves and an entire safe house yellow, just to teach Hal a lesson about meddling in Batman's affairs. Number 4. Black Cat. Black Cat is an anti-hero over at Marvel Comics, who is generally known for being an ally and sometimes romantic partner of Spider-Man. While she typically is shown as being a skilled thief with acrobatic skills and superb training and experience as a fighter, at least that's how she was depicted initially, she doesn't usually have any superpowers to speak of. However, at one point, she did just have straight up powers, and this happened for Black Cat when the Kingpin granted her wish of getting them. However, because this was the Kingpin, it of course did not work out exactly as Felicia had planned. She ended up with bad luck powers, which were extremely useful when fighting an enemy, but not so useful when with an ally or anyone else, as they actually affected not just her opponents, but like anyone who was close to her, which means that Peter suffered from them as well. To make matters worse, Felicia kept her powers a secret from him, which ended up driving a wedge between the two when it came to their romantic and working relationships with one another. Number 3. Green Lantern. Alan Scott used to have a hilarious weakness, similar to someone else on our list actually. Let me know in the comments when and if you figure out who I'm talking about here. Alan Scott had a weakness to wood. The explanation for why and how this weakness developed was explained later by the fact that Alan was snuck up on and basically attacked using a wooden club, sort of, and as a result he subconsciously manifested this as a weakness of his, due to him mistaking it for one when in reality, you know, it just hurts to get smacked by a piece of wood, because that just hurts. Thankfully, Alan Scott has overcome this, and this strange weakness that was actually originally tied to being the hero Green Lantern in the comics no longer bothers Alan or any other Green Lanterns for that matter. Number 2. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is a super interesting character. On one hand, she is extremely powerful and can never lose. She can even potentially have her power utilized to manipulate the stakes of other competitions that she's pulled into. However, this also implies that there are times when she has zero control over her powers, in the sense that she cannot influence the result of an unbalanced battle. In fact, her powers will pull her to serve the side that will be victorious, regardless of whether or not she wants to, in terms of what her mind or her heart is saying to her. This has meant that Iska has been forced to turn her back on her own people, the mutants of Arakko, more than once. She has also had to fight against family, colleagues, and friends before as a result. Although the one thing she can control at times is kind of how she approaches the fighting part of, you know, the battle. Meaning that if she has the option, you know, she can try to fight others involved as opposed to those that she is specifically close to. Like during her fight against planet Arakko and the Great Ring, when she was teleported away to the planet's ocean by Nightcrawler and chose to stay there fighting the planet's creatures in the name of Uranus and the Eternals, as opposed to fighting her own people directly or continuing to fight them directly. Number 1. Power Girl. Power Girl probably has one of the weirdest weaknesses around. Despite being a Kryptonian who is on the level of Superman when it comes to her powers and her strength, she can easily be harmed simply if you use organic materials to hurt her. You know that saying about sticks and stones, which may break your bones? Well, for Power Girl, despite having super durability and invulnerability, this is true. Sticks and stones could break her bones, but industrial steel probably wouldn't hurt her for some reason. Raw organic materials, which have been unprocessed, are revealed to be a weakness of Power Girl's in Supergirl issue number 16 from the 1996 series. Power Girl shares this revelation with her alternate self from the main continuity at the time, who was shocked by the revelation. Which, I mean, fair enough, I would be too if I were Linda Danvers, who was Supergirl at that time. However, I will say I don't think that Kara has this weakness anymore in the comics, thank goodness, but in the 90s, it was a thing, and it was there for some reason. Number 10. Spider-Man. Spider-Man is generally known for being one of the most powerful and most iconic heroes out there, but even he has his weaknesses. In fact, while many of them are not as famous as he is, some of them are pretty ridiculous, including his weakness to ethyl chloride, something that also slows and weakens spiders in the natural world. So if you were ever wondering if there might be a bug spray that you could use to fight against Spider-Man, the answer is actually kinda yes. Although make sure you bring a big spray can of ethyl chloride, as he is a lot bigger than your average spider. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you are loving what we are doing here at Top 10 Nerd, why not hit that subscribe button? It really helps us out and you get more of our content, so yay! Number 9. Superman. Superman is a character that we generally associate with strength, but not often weakness, which is interesting considering that he actually has quite a few weaknesses, probably the weirdest among them being magic. The best way to defeat Superman would simply be be to become a magic user, because against them he becomes kind of powerless. When it comes to the explanation for why, a lot of people's theories surrounding this have to do with the fact that Superman's powers are naturally occurring, not magic based themselves. Although this is usually used as a means to weaken him in the comics, as he doesn't have a natural means to defend against magic, and it's one of the few things like kryptonite that his invulnerability does not protect him from. In fact, narratively speaking, this is likely why he was made weak to magic to begin with, to help give him more to struggle against as a character, as he's kinda OP usually. Number 8. Deadpool. The problem with Wade Wilson is while he often has a good heart, he doesn't question how he's being used as often as he should. So despite having heroic intentions, he often becomes a pawn of his villains, being controlled by them and manipulated into doing their evil bidding. What's worse than becoming as bad as your own supervillains? Working for them blindly, obviously. It was this mentality that led Deadpool into being brainwashed on multiple occasions into being used for more villainous pursuits, and that caused him to end up working on the wrong side, working for Captain America whilst he was really a reality warped Hydra sleeper agent. Kinda not the best time to be working for Captain America, since at that point he was a bad guy. But Deadpool really loves Captain America, so he wanted him to be good. My heart, Wade, no, don't do it. Number 7. Huntress. I feel bad now about putting Huntress above Deadpool. Deadpool's pretty bad. Oh well. Blood cries for blood is a saying that Huntress has always been particularly attached to. Helena Bertinelli is a vigilante whose motives are based around revenge. Witnessing the murder of her family turned her into a violent and brutal hero, who even Batman often criticizes for being too bloodthirsty. And Batman himself is a pretty violent hero, so that should give you an idea of just how violent Huntress can be. Sometimes she could actually be considered worse than the crime lords that she has hunted. Number 6. Iron Man. Where to start with Iron Man? Not only is the family fortune that he amassed built on the creation and sale of weapons, making him a war profiteer, but he has also turned evil multiple times. And if you're dealing with evil genius Tony Stark, he often ends up being far more dangerous than some of Marvel's most famous big bads. There was the big reveal that he had manipulated into working with Kang, which actually led to Tony having to be defeated by the Avengers and a younger version of himself. There is the events of Axis, where an evil Tony manages to prevent himself from being reversed back to good, but played along like he had been. Even when he's not evil, Tony doesn't always make the best moves. He was also responsible for the accident that transformed Bruce Banner into the Hulk, and in the MCU, his ego and obsession with thinking he knows best led to the creation of Ultron, which in the comics was a terrible event that Hank Pym was responsible for. And we still haven't even talked about Tony Stark's views in the first Civil War, which were super problematic, which is probably why he was super against the second Civil War. Number 5. Punisher. Frank Castle does have a strong moral code, but, and it's a big but, he has no qualms with killing people, which is kind of what makes him pretty bad, even when compared to his own villains. Like, don't get me wrong, I think he's somewhat justified when it comes to why he does what he does, I get it, but going in and blowing your enemies away with big guns when that is exactly what they did to your family just seems like a bad way to approach a situation. Wouldn't it make more sense for Punisher to be anti-violence and maybe anti-guns? Fighting fire with fire just seems like it would create more problems than it solves. And often for Frank, this is one of the reasons why so many other heroes have problems with him, and why he often ends up being labeled as an anti-hero. Also, if you're an anti-hero, you're probably a superhero that is worse than, your villains. Just saying. Sometimes at least. Number 4. Vegeta. If you're also a Dragon Ball fan, the presence of Vegeta on this list should not surprise you. As much as we all love him, I think it's also pretty obvious that he's kinda the best of the worst. Or the worst of the best? When it comes to his attitude problems at least. He's kind of a huge jerk who is a villain turned reluctant hero, and even when he's trying to be heroic, his ego and pride often get in the way of that. His desire to prove that he's the best fighter led him to endangering the planet when he allowed Cell to achieve a greater power level. Vegeta wanted to prove that he could beat Cell even when the supervillain was in his perfect form. And it was this mistake on Vegeta's part that put everyone in danger and led to him getting his butt whooped by Cell. Cause yeah, obviously Vegeta was not stronger than perfect form Cell. He should have just stuck with semi-perfect Cell, but no, Vegeta's always gotta fight the toughest guys. Number 3. The Illuminati. I feel like we all agree that the Illuminati are just the worst secret superhero group at this point to ever exist. They're basically a group of heroes that decided they should be the ones to rule over other supers' decisions, because they are the smartest and they know the best. By the way, thinking you're the smartest and that you know the best is usually a sign that you actually don't. Black Panther was invited to join the Illuminati but refused, thinking it was an overall bad idea and not wanting to be involved with any of what he knew would ultimately be bad decision making on their part. And man, he was right. He was pretty right there. The Illuminati have definitely made some really bad decisions over time. Namely, when they decided to banish Hulk from Earth and thereby inadvertently cause the events of World War Hulk to happen, when Hulk returned and blamed them for the death of his wife and his child, and basically the destruction of the world that they'd sent him to. A fair assumption to make when the ship that they had sent him there on randomly exploded, causing mass destruction. He wasn't really right, but also, that's a fair assumption to make, to be like, why did you kill everyone that I loved? You blew up that ship, obviously. Number 2, Hal Jordan. Okay, so I know what Hal would say when it comes to being on this list. That a lot of the things we and Batman blame him for weren't really his fault. It was all Parallax, he would say. But Parallax was really only able to corrupt Hal because of his own fear that lived within him. So although it sounds harsh, it was still ultimately kind of Jordan's fault for allowing himself to be full of fear in the first place. And even if we want to excuse his obliteration of the Green Lantern Corps and his attempt to destroy the universe, there's still the fact that even after that Parallax stuff, he still behaved like a self-serving Sinestro at times. Let's not forget during Rebirth when he abandoned the new Green Lantern recruits, Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz. The pair had failed the training test that Hal had given them, so Hal decided as their mentor to link them together, forcing them to partner up and then just dip to go deal with some other space stuff, leaving these brand new lanterns in charge of protecting all of Earth. Granted, he was looking for the Lantern Corps so they would have other lanterns to train them, but still, they were not ready for this responsibility. At least he makes sure to lecture them on how they better be able to overcome great fear before he leaves, you know, like how he wasn't able to do. Feel like he's just like self-contradicting himself. He's like, yeah, also don't mess it up, you know, like me, like I did. I'm a great teacher, guys. Bye, see you later. Number 1, Homelander. Homelander from the Boys series is likely one of the most terrifying superheroes that we have in comics, namely because he isn't really a superhero, or well, he is, but he certainly acts more like a villain, and his supervillains, well, they are kind of the heroes of the story, trying to put a stop to all the fear-mongering and cover-ups involving the Seven and the corporation protecting them, Vought International, who also kind of created them. Homelander is known for his aggressive and sociopathic nature. He's brutally violent, and because he was primarily raised in a lab, he has a lack of understanding of love and a lack of connection to or empathy for humanity, which makes him a pretty problematic superhero. Really more of a supervillain. But he's advertised as a superhero, so da-da-da! Number 10, Batman Who Laughs. Look, I love Batman Who Laughs as much as the next person. It's a really cool concept for a character, but honestly, he's a character who's simply been overdone at this point. Batman Who Laughs being the most deadly villain out there because he's a combo of the Joker and Batman seems like, I don't know, a bit much when you put him on the level of multiversal threat that he became. I could understand Earth level threat, maybe even a universal threat, but multiversal? Whew, that was pushing it a bit far. Granted, at least he went to that great height and then has since had some time to kind of cool off, dying during Dark Knight's death metal in 2021. But I have no doubt that at some point, he will return, via some kind of weird resurrection plot, no doubt. And I mean, honestly, I'd be fine with it. I just need a couple more years off and then I'll be ready. But for now, I need a break, still. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk Batman, I personally love talking Batman, one of my favorite superheroes still of all time, be sure to check out our Batman playlist where we have tons more Batman content for you. Number 9, the Riddler. He's a guy that loves riddles. And well, that's kinda it. I mean, I guess Edward Nygma has also often been painted as a genius in the comics. He is a genius, so he does have that going for him. But Batman himself has, you know, also been known to be attributed as a genius. And often it's the Riddler's own gimmick, his penchant and honest obsession for riddles, that makes him both interesting, but at the same time is often his weakness or his hubris. So while I do love him as a character, I sometimes think we play him up to be more of a threat than he really is, considering that he's just a really smart dude who really loves riddles. Like many others in Batman's rogues gallery, he doesn't have any superpowers, and in Riddler's case, he isn't even as as fit as many others are. And when it comes to even the one thing he does have, his smarts, Batman is still able to often outsmart him.
And it ate Gorilla Grodd. Gorilla Grodd is a Flash rogue from Africa's Gorilla City. The original Grodd, which debuted in DC Comics in 1959, was a telepath who could control other animals and had a form of mind control as well over humans. In the New 52, all inhabitants of Gorilla City had accelerated mental attributes due to the Speed Force, but Grodd was still the superior member of their species. On The Flash in the CW, Grodd is a very intelligent gorilla experimented on by Star Labs to try to create a super soldier for the US government. However, the and unethical treatment caused him to grow angry and evil, and he escaped seeking vengeance. Grodd has powerful mind control powers on top of superhuman strength and enhanced intellect, and at one point even combined with the Flash to be a psychopathic, telepathic gorilla with super speed. So I mean, like, we should be scared of him. Like, yeah, that makes sense, and his pop figure's pretty cool. But other than that, I get that like he's a telepathic gorilla, but it's still super speed. You shouldn't really have to worry when it's super speed. How are you able to control my mind if it's able to move at super speed? I'm gonna say that every single damn time. In its 7, Weather Wizard. Barry was struck by lightning. Why does weather have any impact on this man? Meteorological man, known as the Weather Wizard, was a menace to both Barry Allen and Wally West's versions of the Flash, and one of the most overpowered super criminals that they ever faced in the comics. First appearing in 1959's The Flash number 110, criminal Mark Martin armed himself with the Weather Wand, which was an advanced piece of technology which could control eolic energy. Martin took the wand from his deceased brother, who was a scientist who never intended on that object to leave the lab, but with some modifications it became a weapon for, criminals. At full power, the wand could summon lightning storms, rain clouds, or change the weather entirely, which I don't know why it's listed separate from summoning lightning storms, but oh well. And whatever the weather, Martin could use his mighty powers to rob banks and cause mass panic, kind of like the world's weirdest postman. A later reimagining of the Weather Wizard would see him actually just granted metahuman abilities and lets him control the weather without using the wand, and he's also appeared on the Flash TV show as one of the metahumans created by the Particle Accelerator, which also gave Barry his powers. However, in the show there are 2 versions, one appearing in the first episode, the Joe West kills, and then a second who appears in episode 16 of that same season, both of them being the Martin brothers, Clyde being the first and Mark being the second. But still, again, he has super speed. Why should I be scared of rain? Why should I be scared of rain? Oh no, you're gonna shoot lightning at me? I have super speed, I'm going to go around it. It just doesn't make sense. Come on, give me something to chew on. In at 6, Rainbow Raider. The reason that the good guys are good is because of their morals, okay? Because they channel their anger into something positive, because they can control themselves. But what happens when a hero with powers like Superman is filled with white hot rage? Okay, well, I mean, we saw it in Injustice, but someone able to cause these emotions, such as Rainbow Raider, makes them pretty damn powerful sometimes. Rainbow Raider's powers are derived entirely from the special goggles that he wears, which allows him to project solid beams of rainbow-colored light that he can use offensively or for like a travel as like a slide. It's kind of stupid the way he does it, but oh well. But in addition, he can coat people in certain colors of light to induce certain emotions. There have also been the Rainbow Raiders, which was a team of supervillains that all had like specific color themes that had powers based on their color of the rainbow. But still, just the ability to induce emotion by covering someone in light is enough to make Roy G. Biv pretty kind of scary, but I mean, also, it's super speed. Again, if he has to eat like 1 million tacos over the course of a month to be able to maintain his metabolism and his body, I feel like, oh no, I'm angry. Oh, now I'm not, because, I have super speed and it just wore off. Come on, right? Am I right? I feel like I'm right. Is it just me? How am I doing at number 5? Godspeed. August Hart is the former detective partner of Barry Allen. Okay, August was the only witness to Barry's accident, and while going after a criminal organization called the Black Hole, August was struck by lightning during a Speed Force storm in Central City. August then became the ruthless vigilante known as Godspeed and got his revenge on those he suspected to have killed his brother. He had given up justice since, his killer's brother had gotten free, and, all the things that an evil speedster ends up doing. But I mean, for someone that calls themselves Godspeed, you ain't moving at the speed of gods, alright? I'm just saying. You can keep scrolling, I'm riffing now. It's kinda dumb, alright? If you're gonna call yourself Godspeed, at least make sure that you're actually, like, very, very fast. Not just, like, very, very fast in comparison to a human. Like, come on, the amount of times that they're like, oh, I am the god of speed, and they're not, is just sad. And you know what? There's another one that I'm about to talk about. In at 4, Savitar. Don't get me wrong, okay? I love Savitar as a villain, and despite it possibly being controversial, yet brave, I think that the CW took the Future Flash story and made it work for TV. But where I'm thinking that Savitar is overrated is the Flash DCEU movie, okay? I liked the story, the base was there, but it just kind of felt like the Savitar or Dark Flash thing was put in there for merchandising reasons, or because the CW version was so dope, not because it like organically fit the story. Like, yeah, it made sense that he knocks himself out of the Speed Force to be created, like the Paradox creation for the CW version, but in the movie we see him once when he's coming back from saving his mom, and then he's never mentioned again until the climax. I liked that he had like the metal suit because he kept getting shoved full of like the Krypton tech, but like, come on, I called it. I called that he'd be the other Barry as soon as we saw him the first time, and then as soon as he got like that first bit of Krypton tech in his arm, I called the rest. It felt kind of forced. Like, the marketing team said that they needed to advertise a villain for the movie instead of the villain just being the Paradox itself. But yeah, there's a reason that this guy didn't show up in the trailers, because he didn't really show up in the movie either. Getting close to the end at number 3, Mirror Master. While Mirror Master never seemed like much more than a B-grade supervillain in Flash's rogues gallery, his powers at times make him a lot more. Before he became a Flash villain, the second Mirror Master, Evan McCulloch, was an assassin in Scotland who was already pretty formidable, alright? If you're an assassin that hasn't gotten caught, I should say. However, once he got his mirror gun, he became more powerful. Obviously, it's a freaking mirror gun. The mirror gun gives Mirror Master the ability to travel to an alternate dimension by entering and exiting any reflective surface. On top of being a significant pain in Flash's ass, Mirror Master has also fought Animal Man and was someone that gave him all that he could handle. But I mean, in comparison to the Flash, yeah, Animal Man is gonna have a harder time. The CW used the Sam Scudder version and was only like a minor villain, but honestly, being able to travel through mirrors like that, he should have been more powerful, okay? He trapped the Flash in the mirror dimension, but then they just kind of froze it and he was able to get out. So obviously, there's not really any more threat that this guy poses other than being able to get away when you really think about it. So yeah, sorry Mirror Master fans, but dude's kind of lame. But ultimately, in at number 2, Black Flash. However, there is one speedster that every speedster is scared of, that speedster being the Black Flash. Black Flash is the Grim Reaper of the Speed Force, making his first appearance in The Flash Volume 2, number 138 in 1998. He was seen before the deaths of several speedsters, including Barry Allen, Johnny Quick, and Bart Allen. In essence, not only making him the embodiment of death, but also the speedster omen of death. In the CW Arrowverse, he was Hunter Zolomon after being caught by time wraiths, and was killed in the season 3 finale by Killer Frost when he came after Savitar, since the Paradox was finally catching up with him. In the comics, thanks to the combined efforts of multiple speedsters, including Jesse Quick, Jay Garrick, and Max Mercury, Wally was able to race Black Flash to the end of time, causing death to have no meaning, which didn't matter for long since Barry later returns in the Flash Rebirth, becoming the new Black Flash unknowingly. But like, that doesn't make sense to me, personally, okay? Like, how are you able to race death to the end of time and then death has no meaning? If you are at the end of time, the only thing there is death. So, how does that work? I mean, he's dope, he looks really cool, but just his rules are what make him stupid. Sorry. And finally, in at number 1, Reverse Flash. There you go. That's it. Okay, sure, he's the fastest in the show, but he's just annoying. Like, he keeps coming back too much, okay? Let's let some other people shine. We don't need the Reverse Flash every single goddamn time. Every crossover, every finale, every damn instance that there's like, oh, it's an evil berry, it's not an evil berry, it's Reverse Flash. So yeah, cut it out and just give us someone else, please, for the love of God.
Number 10. Batman's inability to trust. For a superhero with no powers, Batman is able to do remarkably well against much more powerful villains, and is able to stand next to some of the most powerful heroes in the DC universe without looking out of place. And while yes, technically you could count the fact that he's susceptible to being shot or stabbed as a weakness, his greatest weakness is his inability to trust anyone, even his closest allies. Batman is constantly finding himself in situations where he doesn't give his allies the full picture, and as a result, he or his teammates are put in unnecessary danger. The most famous example of this comes from the Tower of Babel storyline, when it was revealed that Batman had developed detailed plans about how to destroy each of his friends and teammates. Ra's al Ghul managed to steal these plans and do a lot of damage to the heroes before Batman realized what was happening. Frankly, it is only through dumb luck that none of the League members were killed in this incident. When the dust settled, the team was furious with Batman for breaching their trust and putting all of them in danger. As the writer of the story, Mark Waid, recently said in an interview where he talked about this arc, Batman's sin to the Justice League was not that he had these plans to counteract each of them, it was that he didn't tell them. If he had just said to Superman, listen, just in case you want to know, I have a backup in case you ever go nuts, Superman would go, awesome, that's good to hear. This is a lesson that Batman has yet to really absorb, despite the amount of times his secrecy has blown up in his face, such as when he kept the Batman Who Laughs prisoner under the Hall of Justice without telling anyone. Number 9. Zatanna has to be able to speak. Zatanna is a stage magician who happens to be capable of real magic. She is capable of casting powerful enchantments that can range from turning enemies into rabbits or erasing their memories. She casts these spells by saying what she wants backwards. For example, when she wants to turn rain into flowers, she says Niar Semo Keb Suru Wolf. The one limitation on this power is that to cast these spells, she has to be able to speak the incantations. So, unlike other magic-wielding characters like, say, Doctor Strange, who could cast a spell by wordlessly waving their hands, if someone manages to gag Zatanna, she is incapable of doing anything to further defend herself, as happened when she was captured by the Joker, who slit her throat and threw her into a water tank. However, she was eventually able to heal herself by using blood magic and writing the spell backwards in her own blood.
Number 8. Rogue. Rogue was one of my favorite characters growing up, and I think what I loved about her so much was the tragedy of her story and her powers. But what's even more, I love the way that Rogue overcame them. Still, this would be a terrible weakness to have or have had, so that's why I'm including Rogue on our list. Rogue's powers allow her to adopt the powers of whoever she comes into physical contact with, actually taking their powers for herself, basically draining them. But that's not all Rogue takes with her touch. She can also take your memories and drain your life force. Or, at least, she could do that. Rogue has since overcome this weakness by facing her fears. As it turns out, it was her own subconscious that was basically making it manifest. Number 7. Wonder Woman. One of Wonder Woman's original weaknesses seems to be in line with what she represents as a character: female power and strength. As an Amazon, Wonder Woman was initially also susceptible to losing her strength and power if she was ever restrained by a man. While some might see this as kind of a sexist weakness in the comics, I would actually see it as kind of being the opposite. To me, it's more meant to symbolize a history of oppression against women and its consequences. At least, that's how I see that weakness. However, regardless of any greater meaning behind it, it was also a pretty silly weakness in the sense that it made Wonder Woman fairly easy to defeat under certain circumstances, and if she was going up against men, because if they just found her bracelets, that's kinda it. So I do have to say I'm glad this is no longer a rule for her in the comics today. Number 6. Nightcrawler. Well, Nightcrawler is a super powerful character overall, and an iconic and amazing character as well. He isn't actually the most powerful teleporter. This has to do with his weird restrictions and weaknesses surrounding teleportation. The big one being that he can only teleport by a max distance of about, I believe, 2 miles at a time. The other main one being the more that he teleports, the more exhausted he gets, and Kurt as a teleporter can tire fairly quickly if he's forced to make multiple jumps, which if he has to go far, he kind of has to do because each jump he can only go so far. Kurt does teleport through the Brimstone dimension, which I saw some people in the comics bringing up as like a super powerful thing, but this is actually more how his teleportation skills work. It's not necessarily something he's choosing to do, as he has to travel through the Brimstone dimension to get where he's going. So while yes, he can travel travel interdimensionally. It's only one dimension, and it's not really by choice, it's more by design. However, Kurt is an amazing character because of his limitations. That's what makes him so great. It means that when Kurt has to push it to save the day, and he often, of course, does just that because he really is a hero, he's often putting his life on the line for ideals he believes in, or for all of Earth or all of life itself, whatever he's defending. That's why we love Kurt. Number 5. Green Lantern. Hal Jordan is Green Lantern, or one of the Green Lanterns anyways, and as a Green Lantern he has a pretty iconic and ridiculous weakness. Or at least for a very long time in the comics he did have that weakness. Hal had a weakness to the color yellow. In fact, all Green Lanterns did for a while. This was as a result of parallax existing within the Green Lantern Corps' central battery. Having the entity of fear within the battery caused all Green Lanterns to develop a weakness to yellow, something that was used in All-Star Batman and Robin and Frank Miller's alternate reality to weaken and torment Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. In the All-Star Batman and Robin comic, Batman and Robin basically paint themselves and an entire safe house yellow, just to teach Hal a lesson about meddling in Batman's affairs. Number 4. Black Cat. Black Cat is an anti-hero over at Marvel Comics, who is generally known for being an ally and sometimes romantic partner of Spider-Man. While she typically is shown as being a skilled thief with acrobatic skills and superb training and experience as a fighter, at least that's how she was depicted initially, she doesn't usually have any superpowers to speak of. However, at one point, she did just have straight up powers, and this happened for Black Cat when the Kingpin granted her wish of getting them. However, because this was the Kingpin, it of course did not work out exactly as Felicia had planned. She ended up with bad luck powers, which were extremely useful when fighting an enemy, but not so useful when with an ally or anyone else, as they actually affected not just her opponents, but like anyone who was close to her, which means that Peter suffered from them as well. To make matters worse, Felicia kept her powers a secret from him, which ended up driving a wedge between the two when it came to their romantic and working relationships with one another. Number 3. Green Lantern. Alan Scott used to have a hilarious weakness, similar to someone else on our list actually. Let me know in the comments when and if you figure out who I'm talking about here. Alan Scott had a weakness to wood. The explanation for why and how this weakness developed was explained later by the fact that Alan was snuck up on and basically attacked using a wooden club, sort of, and as a result he subconsciously manifested this as a weakness of his, due to him mistaking it for one when in reality, you know, it just hurts to get smacked by a piece of wood, because that just hurts. Thankfully, Alan Scott has overcome this, and this strange weakness that was actually originally tied to being the hero Green Lantern in the comics no longer bothers Alan, or any other Green Lanterns for that matter. Number 2. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is a super interesting character. On one hand, she is extremely powerful and can never lose. She can even potentially have her power utilized to manipulate the stakes of other competitions that she's pulled into. However, this also implies that there are times when she has zero control over her powers, in the sense that she cannot influence the result of an unbalanced battle. In fact, her powers will pull her to serve the side that will be victorious, regardless of whether or not she wants to, in terms of what her mind or her heart is saying to her. This has meant that Iska has been forced to turn her back on her own people, the mutants of Arakko, more than once. She has also had to fight against family, colleagues, and friends before as a result. Although the one thing she can control at times is kind of how she approaches the fighting part of, you know, the battle. Meaning that if she has the option, you know, she can try to fight others involved as opposed to those that she is specifically close to. Like during her fight against planet Arakko and the Great Ring, when she was teleported away to the planet's ocean by Nightcrawler and chose to stay there fighting the planet's creatures in the name of Uranos and the Eternals, as opposed to fighting her own people directly, or continuing to fight them directly. Number 1. Power Girl. Power Girl probably has one of the weirdest weaknesses around. Despite being a Kryptonian who is on the level of Superman when it comes to her powers and her strength, she can easily be harmed simply if you use organic materials to hurt her. You know that saying about sticks and stones, which may break your bones? Well, for Power Girl, despite having super durability and invulnerability, this is true. Sticks and stones could break her bones, but industrial steel probably wouldn't hurt her for some reason. Raw organic materials, which have been unprocessed, are revealed to be a weakness of Power Girl's in Supergirl issue number 16 from the 1996 series. Power Girl shares this revelation with her alternate self from the main continuity at the time, who was shocked by the revelation. Which, I mean, fair enough, I would be too if I were Linda Danvers, who was Supergirl at that time. However, I will say I don't think that Kara has this weakness anymore in the comics, thank goodness, but in the 90s, it was a thing, and it was there for some reason.
In its end, Captain Cold. Leonard Snart was raised by an father and took refuge with his grandfather, who worked in an ice truck. When his grandfather died, Snart grew tired of his father's and set out to start a criminal career, because that's a healthy coping mechanism. Snart joined up with a group of small-time thieves in planning out a robbery, and he was issued a gun with a visor to protect his eyes against the flash, but I mean like the flash of the gun, not the flash as in the superhero. But this visor design would later be adapted into his trademark costume. In recent years, he's like added like a radio receiver to it, and you can pick up police traffic or like police radio with it. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, look, I'm sorry. I know that a whole bunch of people love Captain Cold, but okay? When he decided to go solo, and like, yeah, he's really smart about it, but like, he shouldn't be able to hold his own against the Flash. He shouldn't. I'm sorry. Like, I get that he has a cold gun, and like, cold is the opposite of fast because it slows molecules down or whatever the hell the explanation was. But come on. Like, sure, you shattered Johnny Quick's leg, but if I am faster than a frickin' bullet, I'm gonna be faster than a cold flame. Alright, I am. That's just how it works. That's normal. Sorry. 8 and 9 Cobalt Blue. While in the comics, Malcolm Thawne is the lost twin brother of Barry Allen, in the show, that's not really the same thing. In the Arrowverse, Cobalt Blue is Eddie Thawne, who is brought back by the Negative Speed Force in order to make him their avatar. To erase Reverse Flash from the timeline, Eddie shoots himself in the heart in the end of season 1, since he's a direct ancestor of Reverse Flash. But his death created a paradox, since Eddie didn't leave behind any children to continue the Thawne name like he was supposed to. So Eobard Thawne is never born, but he still keeps showing up in the goddamn show. The paradox also created a wormhole that opened and started expanding, pulling Eddie's body to it, and then like it was supposed to swallow up Central City. But this wormhole actually sent him to 2049, where Eddie was then resurrected by the Negative Speed Force. He originally worked as a scientist at Mercury Labs known as Malcolm Gilmore until he was struck by a red lightning bolt from the Negative Speed Force. But the way that his storyline ends, series finale spoilers for The Flash by the way, is that Barry convinces him to let go of the hate, but still stay the Negative Speed Force avatar. Yeah, they have a climactic battle with all the speedster villains of seasons past that lasts like a minute, and then they all disappear, and then they just shake hands at the end. So yeah, I'm gonna say Cobalt Blue, even though we were all waiting for it, is kind of overrated when it comes to the show.
Number 8. Daredevil's radar sense gets confused. When Matt Murdock was a young boy, he was hit by a truck that was carrying a radioactive isotope. This isotope got in his eyes and blinded him, but also heightened his other senses, allowing him to develop his trademark radar sense, which helps him navigate the world and fight crime as Daredevil. While this does give him several advantages, it is also prone to being overstimulated by kinda random things. For example, if he ends up underwater, he can easily lose his bearings and have trouble telling up from down. Even worse though is his weakness to rain. This weakness is kinda inconsistent, as in other versions of the character, like the Ben Affleck movie, rain allows him to see things more clearly, but in the comics it is a serious handicap for the character. In issue 25 of the 2011 Daredevil series, Matt is fighting a villain named Ikari who has a similar radar sense. The fight leads them to a sporting goods store where Matt's narration reveals that he has always been worried that a villain will someday think to use a sprinkler system against him, as rain negates his sense of smell, overwhelms his hearing, and makes his radar sense practically useless, cutting his by 95%. Considering how often it seems to rain in Marvel's New York and how dependent Daredevil is on his radar sense, this is a pretty rough weakness. Number 7. Black Canary if she gets a sore throat. Dinah Lance is the second hero to use the alias of Black Canary, with her mother being the first. While her mother was limited to being a capable hand-to-hand fighter and being able to train canaries to do amazing feats, her daughter has the ability to unleash the powerful canary cry. How she manages this varies depending on the continuity, with it sometimes being a byproduct of a wizard's curse, and sometimes being due to her carrying the metahuman gene. But what the power does remains consistent. The canary cry allows Dinah to control her vocal cords to generate a powerful sonic attack that can deafen her opponents, and when she really lets loose, can destroy metal and even kill people. However, she needs to be in good vocal health to achieve this, and if she ever has laryngitis, she is unable to unleash the canary cry. However, even without the cry, she is one of the best martial artists in the DC universe, so she still manages okay. Number 6. Wolverine's metal skeleton. Wolverine has always been a powerful mutant sporting claws and a healing factor that makes him practically unkillable. Between Between that and his super acute senses, his more than a century of combat training, and his berserker rage, he is not someone you want as an enemy. These abilities got an upgrade when the Weapon X program got a hold of him and coated his skeleton and claws with an indestructible metal called adamantium. While this does make him even more durable, it does come with certain drawbacks. For example, it does make it much more difficult for Wolverine to swim, and foes often take advantage of this, trapping the clawed Canadian underwater and making him experience the feeling of drowning until he manages to escape. The other drawback to this, of course, is that it makes him vulnerable to magnetism. While this wouldn't be too bad of a weakness for most heroes, I mean, how often do you really come across a giant magnet in the world? Wolverine has the misfortune of being a member of the one superhero team that is constantly fighting against a character who is able to manipulate metal with his mind. At best, this makes him immobile for most of the encounters against Magneto, and at worst, it results in him getting his skeleton torn out. Number 5. Snowbird can't leave Canada. When the Inuit goddess of the Northern Lights, Nelvana, needed an agent on Earth to help prevent the return of the evil mystical great beasts, she mated with a human and had the shaman, Michael Two Young Men, use his magic to help deliver the child on Earth. Naria was given a decent grab bag of powers, the most notable of which is the ability to transform into any creature found in the Canadian Arctic. She has used this power to become owls, bears, and even whales, which makes her a formidable force against her enemies. However, due to Shaman not being specific enough when casting the spell that bound her spirit to the land, she is somewhat limited in where she can go. If Snowbird goes or is taken beyond the Canadian borders, she grows weak and sick. The longer she is out of Canada, the weaker she gets, and if she stays out of the country too long, she could even die. This weakness was discovered in Alpha Flight number 12 when the team learned that their leader, Guardian, had walked into a trap set by the evil Omega Flight in New York and teleported to his location to try and save him. Snowbird immediately became emaciated and old and nearly died, and was therefore more of a hindrance than a help in this scenario. Snowbird died in a later comic and was eventually brought back, and as a result, this weakness seems to have disappeared, as she has since traveled outside of Canada and has even left the planet without any ill effects. Number 4. Martian Manhunter and his addiction. John Jones is an alien from the planet Mars who has insanely strong telepathic powers that allow him to read and control minds. He also has super strength and the ability to shapeshift, and the ability to become intangible and phase through objects, making him a very difficult hero to defeat. For many years, Martian Manhunter had a psychosomatic weakness to fire that would cause him to lose the use of his powers and be burned. This weakness is kind of a problem when you consider how many superhero battles result in buildings or cars catching on fire, but what I want to focus on is a lesser known weakness, his cookie addiction. In Martian Manhunter Volume 2, number 24, we learn that John has developed an intense love of Choco's cookies, the DC equivalent to Oreos. When Blue Beetle and Booster Gold decide to play a prank on him by stealing his cookies and buying all the Chocos in a mile radius, we learn that when Martian Manhunter goes too long without his fix, he becomes a mindless Hulk-like creature who angrily smashes up the city, screaming about how he needs his cookies. His rampage isn't stopped until Booster Gold and Blue Beetle lead him to a warehouse full of Chocos where he greedily begins to devour them. Once Manhunter is back to normal, Batman discovers that the chemicals in Chocos, though relatively harmless to human biology, are extremely addictive to Martian physiologies. So yeah, fire is a bad weakness, but a cookie dependency issue is way worse. Number 3. Domino suffers from electorophobia. Nina Thurman has the mutant ability to subconsciously manipulate probability when she finds herself in stressful or dangerous situations in order to give herself the best possible outcome. In simpler terms, she's extremely lucky. If she is shot at, she will instinctively know exactly the right way to duck and dodge her way past the bullets, or the enemy's gun might simply jam. She can make the highly improbable happen in order to survive almost any situation, and it has made her a very difficult character to defeat, but not impossible. In Deadpool Volume 4, number 17, the Merc with a Mouth is planning on assassinating one of the X-Men's most vocal critics in order to earn a place on the team. The X-Men of course do not want to be embroiled in this kind of scandal and send Domino to deal with Deadpool. She ties him to a bed and the two talk, with Wade confessing that he is terrified of cows and Domino revealing that she is terrified of chickens. You'd think she was kidding or lying, but later in the issue when Deadpool escapes and goes after the target again, Domino and Wolverine chase after him only to be taken out of commission when crawling through an air vent when they end up face to face with a chicken. Domino is paralyzed with fear and unable to continue on, which delays her and Wolverine long enough for Deadpool to get away. Considering how much poultry seems to affect her, Domino is lucky she doesn't come across them more often. Number 2. Mon-El and Lead. One day when Superman was just a young super boy, he looked to the sky and saw a crashing rocket. He intercepted it and discovered a young man inside with a locket from Clark's Kryptonian parents, Jor-El and Lara Lor-Van, wishing him luck on his travels. The young man had suffered amnesia, but the fact that he had the same powers as Superboy led Clark to deduce that this was his long-lost brother from Krypton. He named him Mon-El, and the two began fighting crime together while enjoying their newfound sense of family. However, Superboy soon became suspicious of his new brother, as Krypto didn't seem to recognize him, and his belt was made from a metal not found on Krypton's periodic table. As he did a lot in the Silver Age, Clark began putting Mon-El through a series of elaborate and convoluted tests to prove he was an imposter. He took a bunch of lead balls and painted them green before throwing them into space. He then went to a nearby planet with Mon-El to play baseball. When the green balls showed up, Superboy pretended they were kryptonite meteors and pretended to be affected. When Mon-El also began acting sick, Clark took this as proof that he was an imposter, but as Mon-El's amnesia wore off, he revealed that he was actually from the planet Daxam and had met Jor-El on his travels. As a Daxamite, he had the same powers as Superboy, but really did have a vulnerability to lead. While a Kryptonian would return to full health when kryptonite was removed, a Daxamite exposed to lead was doomed to a slow and painful death. Superboy was forced to put Mon-El in the Phantom Zone until he could find a cure. Mon-El has had a few adventures since then as a member of the Legion of Superheroes, but the fact that he could be killed by a relatively common element is pretty dumb. Number 1. Aquaman gets dehydrated. As the son of a human and an Atlantean, Arthur Curry is capable of some pretty astounding feats. He is able to survive underwater and swim at incredible speeds. He has super strength and expert fighting skills, as well as the ability to control the oceans when wielding the Trident of Poseidon. Oh, and he can also talk to and control fish, an ability that might seem lame until he attacks you with a megalodon. However, he also has a weakness that is pretty silly. If Aquaman doesn't go back in the water every hour, he begins to grow weak and dehydrated. The severity of this weakness depends on who is writing the comic and what continuity you're in, but the Silver Age version of this character was particularly vulnerable. A great example of this is in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 115, when Jimmy developed the same powers as Aquaman. A villain impersonating Superman was able to trick Aquaman and Jimmy into entering a competition where they stayed out of the water for an hour and then crawled through the desert trying not to die, as the fake Superman taunted them with a pitcher of water. For those wondering, Jimmy won the competition and was made the new king of Atlantis. After they defeated the villain, he ceded the throne back to Aquaman, but the fact that Jimmy beat him in a nefarious but fair competition, and by rights is the true king of Atlantis, makes you realize why Aquaman has so much trouble being taken seriously.